What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Rex of the Nova Hawks. Thank you for your time today, man. It's great to have you here.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so cool to
What's
have
going
you.
on?
Not much. I was just jamming the brand new album, Redemption. This is the debut Nova Hawks album. Do you just want to talk like how the making of this was? Was there kind of like an idea that you were trying to achieve, or like a preconceived idea? How did Redemption sort of like see the light of day?
Basically, myself and Heather are the Nova Hawks. We're not a two-piece band, really, but it's kind of our baby, and we are friends on other instruments. But we worked together already in kind of between friends. Jam night. We actually did a short tour together, um, and through a social circle of people, it kind of naturally grew into its own entity. And it was kind of, for lack of a better word, like an organic bringing together of ideas. So, we had a bunch of ideas kind of lying around from previous work that we'd kind of touched on, gigs and things. And then, it was kind of born out of kind of 2, 3 years of jamming and, but let's just do a record.
Hmm.
So it didn't really have a preconceived idea. It kind of just naturally came together.
It was like a very organic process.
Exactly, yeah. We actually did most of it in. My parents have a kind of garage cabin type house behind the family home, and we did most of it in there, kind of garage style. We did. Well, we both work with different bands, and I do tour production stuff as well. So I was traveling all over the place. So there's bits recorded in LA, bits recorded in New York, bits recorded in London. We did most of the vocal in London, but the majority of the writing and the record was put down in my parents' cabin house.
Hmm. So like did maybe like working with tour production and working with other musicians in the past and kind of like going into multiple realms of the world, like did that help influence this album as well?
Massively. I found myself working, or actually guitar teching and kind of depping rhythm guitar for a band from LA that used mostly open G tunings. And if you're familiar, obviously, with the Rolling Stones, most of Keith's stuff is in open G. And I was lucky enough to be on some of the Stones tour in the middle of doing the record and working with this other band. Um, I ended up around a lot of people playing in like open G, doing that kind of desert stuff. And it really, although some of the songs already existed, I found myself just jamming around with that stuff, having my guitars tuned that way. And it changed everything, really. It kind of turned it in a more of a kind of old school blues direction than it was before.
Yeah, like that was a very interesting way of putting it because I feel like that there's many different like vibes and many different like tests of time through rock on here, from classic rock to more blues rock. Like what were you
Mhm.
trying to like stick with a certain sound throughout the entirety of this album, or was there maybe like a lot of experimentation involved?
There was a lot of experimentation. There was some of the songs actually started out much heavier than they are. Some of the songs sounded kind of more acoustic ballad than they are. And I guess we found a middle ground by having that like deserty blues. I mean, Heather, the singer, she used to live in the United States. She lived more kind of in the South and was around a lot more gospel music, stuff like that. And I think it was a binding of styles for both of us. Although we're British, there's definitely a lot of American influence in there.
Oh, that's awesome. So like it has many different time periods, many different regions, and just many different eras of rock combined into one.
Definitely, yeah. And then also, I must add that we formed this band out of the Black Country, which is where I'm from and near to where Heather lives. Which, if you're not familiar with the Black Country, which not everybody is, it's area near to Birmingham where Judas Priest and Slade and Wizard and loads of bands from the West Midlands in the UK. So we actually purposefully did that we went to that area to write this stuff, which is why we did it in my parents' cabin house.
It sounds like it's really cool how like it wasn't just a typical like, all right, let's find the nearest studio or let's find, go to this. It seems like the presentation of this album and like the way that you recorded it is almost like as important as when we actually hear the final product.
Yeah, for sure. It's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, you can make many decisions when it comes to this stuff, and you can be super pro about we're going to go to this studio and do it. It just kind of it came together as more an inspiration than it was a technicality or a practical side.
Do you, well, what I've noticed is that like when you go from a track such as Voodoo to a track such as Dusty Heart or Run Wild or Love Games, it almost seems like there was many different like vibes throughout this song. Would you say that like each song is maybe a representation of how you or Heather were like feeling at a particular time?
Definitely, there are little bits of different, like Dusty Heart would be, in fact, if I go through them track by track, Dusty Heart was kind of something that was inspired by kind of a poem that Heather had written. So it was just words as opposed to music. And we were trying to write, and she said that particular day she was struggling to kind of write melodies. And I just threw her some chords. We weren't in the same room. I think I just sent it over mobile phone, And I said, here's some chords. Sing me whatever you got and send it back in 1 hour. Kind of just to try and do something on the spot. And that's what she came up with. And then we found that there was a particular kind of, almost like a Nick Cave sound to that song. It was a little bit darker. Or maybe even Mark Lanigan or something. And we shot it over to our friend Jimmy Sweet, who lives in LA, that I work with often as well. And he kind of perfected it, I think, with that, with the male duo voice thing. So yeah, I mean, there was that. That's a particular inspiration. Run Wild, again, was part of that kind of me jamming in like open tunings. I grew up listening to the Black Crowes a lot, and it really reminded me of the Black Crowes.
I see a lot of that in the DNA of your sound.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say when you grow up listening to something and kind of learning people's riffs, and it becomes part of who you are. And that particular song, actually, I remember jamming that in Arizona whilst traveling, and the desert. I probably might sound a little pretentious, but being around Phoenix and stuff, it's all just desert, and that. That particular song kind of like struck a chord, excuse the pun. We actually have Rob Cores, who used to be in the Black Crowes, on organ. He plays keys on that track.
Oh, wow. That had to have been a great dream come true, right?
Yeah, well, he's actually a buddy. He's a friend first, but we never worked together. And I was like, this just sounds like his vibe. So obviously we had to call him. So it was nice to have him on the record. He plays on a couple of tracks, actually. Yeah. And anything that's organ on the album, Rob played.
Oh, wow. That's great. And I'd imagine, like, I love the story of what you heard about Dusty Heart, like how Heather, like, had, like, vocal lines, and then maybe, like, you kind of work together in a way. Like, do you sometimes, like, for lack of better words, do you almost consider that there could be some songs where, like, the meaning of the lyrics could help influence the sound of the song?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I think you always paint you do paint a picture with audio, don't you? And like I said, I don't mean to sound cheesy or anything, but even being in Arizona, being around all the kind of, I mean, it's just like red desert, isn't it? I feel like from a musical perspective, when you're around that stuff and you start to jam, even just sitting with your laptop, it paints a picture. And I think sometimes, especially if you're bouncing back and forth, you're influencing each other as you do that,
Yeah, and your setting and your environment, it doesn't sound cheesy to say that at all, like what you said about Arizona, because I think regardless, your setting and your atmosphere is going to influence you one way or another, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, definitely. And for good or bad, something negative can definitely influence you just as much as something, beautiful to look at. Or, if you're feeling angsty or miserable, you can still create,
Yeah. Do you, and I'd imagine that sometimes inspiration strikes at very inconvenient times as well.
Always, it's always inconvenient.
Yeah. I,
It's I think yeah, the timing of that stuff. I mean, I'm quite a busy person. I keep myself active, so my especially personally, my inspiration is usually an inconvenience for timing.
Mhm. Well, it's funny. Every musician I've interviewed always says that they always get ideas in the shower. So I'm like saying that like gear companies need to start making waterproof gear just so you could like fit like a whole studio in your shower.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you could always use a voice memo, couldn't you, on your phone if you could reach far enough from the shower.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you could,
Just
yeah,
bring
that's not a bad idea.
yeah bring the Marshall amp in the shower with you. What's the worst that could happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You said that like a lot of the songs had different meanings and every song has like its own story. So could a listener maybe like approach this from any different angle, or do you suggest that a listener starts off with Voodoo and ends with Love Games and so on?
I think it did have a kind of, I don't know, Heather specifically really like went over this with a fine comb in terms of the story it tells. Um, but I think people could, you can always start anyway, you know. I personally think Redemption might be the one song I would say that embodies most of it in one. You know, if somebody was going to jump into one track, I would pick that one. But I think it's a nice little story from beginning to end. You know.
Yeah. And for you as like a musician, like do you have like a theoretical element, like you mentioned, like kind of like going into the Rolling Stones and working in with their sort of like tuning style? Do you actually have a theoretical background that you apply to your songwriting?
Sometimes I did study music myself. In fact, Heather did as well. Um, so I think me more so than her. I think because I do a lot of. I think I'm probably more of a technical, practical person sometimes. Um, in a balance of being creative, I mean. Um, so I definitely do kind of apply a certain amount of theory to what I'm doing, probably unintentionally, but I do.
Yeah. When you study it so much, you just don't even think about it. It comes subconsciously, right?
That's it. It almost becomes like doing it by numbers, which sounds boring, but um, you just know when something flows, I guess, for yourself anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And people say that like music theory is not rock and roll, or like I've heard that stupid argument before that like music theory is like, it dictates you or it's narrow-minded, but I think when you study music and you have theoretical elements, it has to open your ideas to many new open your mind to many new ideas.
Definitely, I think there's pros and cons to everything. I've got to admit, it did take me a while after studying to kind of get out of that mindset. Um, and I feel like I'm more on the listening to what's going on side these days. But there was a period of time when I feel like it might have given me writer's block because I was too stuck in my ways a little bit.
Yeah.
But it does help because I know. I mean, before all this madness happened in 2020 onwards, with the pandemic stuff, I was helping run some jam nights um, at Hard Rock Cafe in London. And being able to just jam with musicians and be around a lot of people that are kind of, I guess, musically minded, session players, people that have studied a lot, you can really see how it changes the evolution of people's playing, you know?
Definitely, definitely. I feel like, there's an essence of freedom, but then there's an essence of discipline, and I feel like, it helps an artist one way or another. Like a free musician, I feel like, and a disciplined musician, I think in the end are able to deliver something that's very, very beautiful.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah.
Yep. And the final question I wanted to ask you is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the release of the Nova Hawks with Redemption, like maybe like a live stream performance to help promote the release of it, or anything else?
We would love to. However, we don't live in the same cities. So we are hoping, I mean, we've been putting music videos out. A very good friend of ours called Ian Sepulveda he's from Santiago, made those. If you haven't seen them already, if you go onto YouTube, you can watch Voodoo and then Redemption is a lyric video, but it's kind of animated. So we've been promoting our music that way. Hopefully, in the next few months, we will be able to do some kind of live stream. We were hoping that we'd go back to gigging, but I think the last 2 days, the UK has already started cancelling festivals. So let's see. Who knows? The Run Wild will be the third single, which comes out with the album, which will be out on February 12th. And for now, we're just putting out music, basically because there's nothing else we can do.
Yeah. Well, this album sounds great, and I really hope to hear more from the Nova Hawks very soon. I really think that this is a great album that many people are going to enjoy, and really, I could see this being a gateway into people becoming fans of rock and roll.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We are here with the Nova Hawks. Redemption out February 12th via Frontiers. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.